The Firm, India's only show on corporate law, tax and audit matters.
In 2013, India rewrote its over 100-year-old land law to make the forcible acquisition of land by government a fairer process. In 2014, a new government proposed amendments to the barely one-year-old law, saying it was coming in the way of industrial projects and hurting economic growth. 3 ordinances later, in 2015, the government is now suggesting that states enact and implement their own land laws. Hello and welcome to the big land debate on this special edition of The Firm, coming to you from the National Law School in Bengaluru. I have with me in the audience some of the brightest young legal minds of the city and a veteran panel. Raghavan, Senior Counsel and a very well-known member of the bar here. Aditya Sondhi, also Senior Counsel and another very well-known member of the bar here. Narendra Pani, Professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. And Pavan Srinath, Head of Policy Research at the Takshashila Institution. The Narendra Modi government wants to amend the 2013 land law to allow several categories of projects exemption from having to seek consent of landowners and from having to do a social impact assessment. The proposed exempt list includes defense production, rural infrastructure, affordable housing and industrial corridors. The government also proposes to keep open-ended the return of unutilized land. These and other amendments were passed by the Lok Sabha, but the Rajya Sabha referred the bill to a joint committee. With parliamentary approval pending, these changes to the land law have been effected by 3 subsequent ordinances.
Let's look at the object of this new law. The object of the new law, as we have seen from the preamble to the statute, is that it should be transparent, make it fairer to the landowner, and make it easier for land acquisition. Right. These were absent in the 1894 Act. Now, my view is that by making the amendments to the 2013 law, you are really putting the clock back.
See, Chapter 2 and 3, which deal with the social impact assessment and the exclusion of acquisition of multi-crop fertile land, are at the very heart of this new law. Right. And having introduced it after a lot of contemplation, to now try and exempt these or exclude these in a wide array of proposed acquisitions, as the ordinance now seeks to do, I think strikes at the very heart of the old law. It's morally wrong, I think. It also does away with the very deep-rooted purpose of not only providing compensation for land losers, but also to assess the impact that it has on their society.
The entire strategy, including the 2013 Act, is fundamentally flawed. It is fatally flawed, because it's trying to use real estate values to overcome a major challenge in development. The issue is really today you have more than half your population dependent on agriculture, and agriculture accounts for less than 15% of your GDP. And you're trying to bridge that gap by just saying, I will give you 4 times the market value of land. That number will not work for both sides, because even if I take 4 times today, I know tomorrow it will be worth more. And it will not work for the industry, because that simply makes it uncompetitive. And then the current ordinance, which tries to say that, okay, we will step in and withdraw, that doesn't help either, because the farming community is deeply suspicious of industry taking over land, claiming it will go in for manufacturing and ending up with sheer real estate. There are any number of projects in Bangalore which started off as industries and are today real estate projects. The entire Rajaji Nagar industrial estate, if you like, is full of marriage halls. The entire process, that credibility is, and the credibility is not helped by either of the ordinances. The first ordinance talks about changing private company to private entity. Why? Is it a private entity? Don't you need to be a company if you're going to manufacture something? The second, or the 2015 ordinance, goes a step further and says that, I will declare land 1 kilometer on either side of the main road as one of the examples. Why should an industrial corridor be on the main road? That is prime real estate property. The real estate intentions of this ordinance are becoming clearer day by day.
Then what's the solution, Professor Pani?
The solution has to be in terms of giving farmers a stake in industrial development. You have the national investment and manufacturing zones, convert them into some kind of public sector company in which you give shares to farmers. You get the land on that for 99-year leases, don't give it over so that people can make real estate money out of it. If they don't produce for 5 years, take it back and give it to someone else. And the profits of that can be given to the farmers.
What Professor Pani is, of course, suggesting is a sort of a paradigm shift.
It is, yes.
But what I'm saying is that when the 2013 Act was formulated, there was a lot of thought that went into it. And what we're doing now is a sort of a volte-face. The real problem with that Act, I think, for industry was the market value. Even though a professor says that 4 times is illusory, but 4 times is also a lot.
But in rural markets, I mean, you know, where transactions are not very frequent and therefore the benchmark in itself could be flawed, 4 times may or may not mean anything actually. If you look at the future value of that land, let's say 3 or 5 or 10 years from now.
No, I'll tell you what's been happening. One of the criteria to determine market value is the existence of a sale deed valuation in the proximity. So the moment some neighbors were getting wind of the fact that there is an acquisition on the cards, there would be these small parcels of land that would be part of sham sale deeds, if you will, marked up at a very high price. Then that sets the benchmark. So there's a lot of sort of activism, if you will, going on both sides.
Yeah, fair enough.
So really what the government faced as a roadblock, according to me, was the economics of it. That the cost of acquiring land was too high. But they haven't touched that part. What they've touched now is the social impact assessment, which is more a function of time.
And the consent, which is also a function of time and a function of actually allowing for that sale to happen. You get to the price only if you get the consent, and I think that's where they've struck at the very root of the entire process. And
worst of all, it's being done through an ordinance. I have something to say on that whenever
we'll come to that question in just a minute.
But I think the challenge is exactly what you say, right? Land markets are not liberal in India. The value of land accrues to the person who can change the land use from agriculture to something else, rather than the person who actually owns the land. So my concern is that we're having this entire debate on land acquisition, which is the involuntary transfer of land from an owner or a farmer to someone else, while we are not talking about the larger context of are we really giving property rights to people, and are we establishing title reforms and liberalizing these land markets such that, so even 4 times the agricultural value of the land is really not that much when someone can change that land use to industry or something else, and that gain might be a windfall of 10-fold or 20-fold sometimes.
My only complaint is that why should you take over land completely? You're saying it's for an industrial purpose. You're not. Why do you do it in a way that allows them to convert it into real estate? That has a safeguard you definitely need. It's not as if you're going to end up with industry, or in fact, if you look at what's happening to manufacturing in India, you're encouraging industry to move from manufacturing to real estate.
Professor, you're right. We should not permit misuse. But to say that a part of the profit of the enterprise should go to the farmer from whom the land has been acquired, respectfully, I think is utopian.
In many other countries, we've seen the forcible acquisition of land. The US is no moral example by any stand. In India, where we desperately need development, where we desperately need industry, where we desperately need employment for some 200 million youth that are going to hit our employment markets in the next decade or so, where are those employment opportunities going to come from if business is not allowed to put up factories?
The pattern that is adopted in a capitalist society like the United States may not work in a country like ours, where a large number of people, the majority of the population, are still agrarian. So we will not be able to adopt the eminent domain concept as it exists in the United States, where there is hardly a chance for challenge to an acquisition. But here, the whole problem is that public purpose as a concept, which is essential in land acquisition, is misused.
How many of you truly believe that the proposed amendments, as well as the ordinances which follow that line of thought, are actually anti-farmer and pro-industry? Is that most of the crowd? So now tell me, where will industry set up?
We need to understand that what is the role of state in forceful acquisition. And this is all the more important question in India's perspective because the kind of land records we have. The question over title is a big question here. So that is the reason why state needs to intervene. And given the condition of India and given the kind of population and demography we have, we need a lot of employment. That is not going to happen through agriculture. So we need to kind of, government has to support industry in some sense. Yes, we need to have checks and balances, but I think this ordinance has. We have R&R provisions in this Act, so I think it takes care of that.
I'd like to mention something. I think the ordinance, if passed, essentially legalizes displacement in a country where millions of people have been displaced in the name of development. Also, I'd like to bring in the case of the Adivasis, for whom, even if they are resettled, their community integration as well as their relationship with the ecosystem is completely lost. So in that case, their identity, their sustenance will not be the same anymore.
So you're opposed to the amendments as well as the ordinance,
yes.
right?